There are interrogations that follow protocol, and then there are the ones that collapse into chaos, ruin agents' careers, and permanently rewrite the FBI's rules of engagement. Today, the top 10 FBI interrogations that went catastrophically wrong: manipulation, failures, lies, breakdowns, fights, psychological warfare, and criminals who outplayed the very people no one is supposed to outplay. Number 10. The interrogation of Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. When the FBI finally caught Ted Kaczynski, they expected to see a deranged man on the verge of breaking. But the exact opposite happened. Instead of confessions, absolute silence. Kaczynski answered briefly, coldly, logically, and it became obvious very quickly. He was smarter than half the people in the room. The FBI tried pressure, provocation, psychological breaks. Nothing worked. He was the one running the interrogation, not the agents. He forced them to read his manifesto, argue with him, and then declared he would only talk in exchange for removing the death penalty. The interrogation hit a dead end. It wasn't the FBI who broke him. It was his attorneys. Number 9. The Tim Treadwell interrogation that nearly blew the case. Tim Treadwell was a witness in an illegal firearms trafficking investigation. The FBI expected straightforward answers, but everything spiraled out of control. Treadwell suddenly began screaming aggressively, accusing agents of surveillance, slamming the table, and at one point even tried to knock out the security camera. Agents had to stop the interrogation because the man was in an acute psychotic state. As a result, the FBI lost key testimony and an entire federal operation collapsed. This interrogation went down in history as a prime example of how an unstable witness can destroy a high-level case. Number 8. The interrogation of Lyda Southard, the woman who outsmarted the FBI with a single look. The FBI expected to see a frightened woman, but Lyda Southard, one of America's first female serial killers, turned out to be a master of psychological manipulation. During the interrogation, she didn't cry, didn't defend herself, didn't confess to a single murder. Instead, she behaved as if the agents were inconveniencing her. Every question she flipped back at them as an accusation. You're doing your job poorly. You don't understand anything. You're trying to jail an innocent woman. Within minutes, agents were stumbling over their own questions. The FBI was so stunned by Southard's manipulative control that the official reports noted uses emotional pressure and sexualized influence. But the worst part came later. She gained so much trust from a prison guard that he eventually helped her escape custody. The interrogation was a total failure. The interrogation of Sarah Jo Pender, the woman who made an FBI agent break the law. Pender was called the female Charles Manson, not for the murders, but for her talent for breaking people. When the FBI tried to interrogate her about a double homicide, everything went off script from the very first minute. She didn't beg, argue, or get angry. She studied the agent like she was reading a manual. Within hours, the interrogation devolved into a farce. The very agent who was supposed to extract a confession began trusting her. Later, it came out that he had been fully manipulated by Pender, convinced she couldn't have killed anyone, and even secretly helped her plan an escape. The FBI got zero information. Pender got a doorway to freedom. Months after the disastrous interrogation, she escaped prison, using access provided by the guard who had fallen for her. The FBI agent realized too late whom he was letting go. Gonzalo Lopez was already serving time for kidnapping and murder. When he was brought in for an interrogation to reassess his threat level, the FBI wanted to know whether he had connections, resources, or any plan to escape. From the start, everything felt off. Lopez sat calmly, didn't deny the crimes, spoke quietly but confidently. Agents assumed he was broken and no longer dangerous. It was a fatal mistake. During the interrogation, he studied everything: the room, the angles, distances, guard reactions, and most importantly, the inmate transport schedule. The FBI believed he was being manipulative. but failed to classify the threat as red code. Because of that, the transport remained standard. Weeks later, Lopez executed one of the boldest escapes in Texas history. He snapped his restraints, knocked out a guard, jumped out of the transport bus, and vanished. Then came hell. He murdered 5 people, including 4 children. Every single death could have been prevented if that interrogation hadn't been labeled low risk. 5. The interrogation of James Earl Ray, the killer of Martin Luther King Jr. After the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., the FBI was certain they would break Ray in a single session. He looked nervous, exhausted, intimidated. A perfect target for a hard interrogation. But something unexpected happened. Ray controlled the conversation completely. He spoke little, but with such precision, that agents began to doubt whether he had acted alone. He provided just enough information to keep them interested, but never enough to reveal the truth. Some experts believed he was telling the agents exactly what they wanted to hear. The FBI got no confession, no details, and no escape route, nothing. And the worst part, Ray convinced them he was not dangerous so effectively that years later he escaped prison with 6 other inmates. He used the exact weaknesses in the system that he had studied during those interrogations. The FBI lost twice in the interrogation and in preventing his escape. The interrogation of Joseph Christopher Garcia, when the Texas 7 outsmarted the FBI. Garcia wasn't just a killer, he was a strategist. When the FBI brought him in after multiple escape attempts, agents assumed they were dealing with a typical gang member. But Garcia already knew the interrogation was his opportunity. He sat quiet, confident, answered only half of the questions, ignored the rest, or turned them into jokes. Agents thought he was simply being difficult. In reality, he was studying everything. Who walked into the room, how fast the guards reacted, which doors were locked and which weren't. The FBI underestimated his coordination skills. They thought he was a lone operator. 2 weeks later, he pulled off one of the largest prison escapes in U.S. history, with 6 other inmates. They seized the armory, put on guard uniforms, and walked out through the main exit. Later, the Texas 7 killed police officer Aubrey Hawkins. And that murder became the catastrophic result of the failed interrogation where the FBI missed that Garcia was the brain of the entire operation. When the FBI failed to realize they weren't facing a human, when the USSR transferred archival materials on Jumagaliev to the FBI, American agents were stunned. He was known as Metal Fang because some of his teeth were replaced with steel. He killed at least 10 people. Some he ate. After his later recapture and international evaluation, FBI agents questioned him as well, hoping to understand the psychology of a pure predator. The interrogation collapsed in the first minute. He answered slowly, almost gently, as if speaking to children. He didn't look angry, just empty. When agents tried to provoke emotion, he smiled. When asked about victims, he corrected their phrasing as if refining the description of his own work. The FBI later admitted they underestimated the scale of his madness. He didn't fear, regret, or hesitate. He was a man immune to psychological pressure because his psyche operated differently. This interrogation went into the archives as one of the most useless ever conducted. Agents obtained nothing. No motives, no remorse, no real understanding. Number 2, Ted Bundy. The interrogation that became a complete catastrophe. The FBI is used to dealing with psychopaths. But Ted Bundy was a different breed of monster. When agents finally got the chance to interrogate him, they expected a classic scenario: pressure, provocation, emotional disruption. Instead, Bundy controlled the room better than the investigators themselves. He smiled, interrupted, calmly dissected questions, as if he were giving a lecture on criminology. FBI agents later admitted he made them feel like students, asking questions to their professor. The biggest mistake happened the moment the FBI gave him too much freedom. Literally. He was allowed to represent himself as an attorney, move around without handcuffs, and work in the courthouse library, and right in the middle of another interrogation prep session. Bundy did the impossible, walked up to a second-story window, looked down, and jumped out. For 6 days, the FBI was in full panic, and the worst part, it was entirely their fault. Bundy returned to custody later, but escaped again, and during his time free, he killed 3 young women. The FBI officially admitted this was one of the most humiliating failures in its history. Number 1. Johnson the Ghost, the interrogation after which the FBI lost a man for 40 years. Johnson is the most mysterious fugitive in U.S. criminal history. He wasn't called the Ghost for nothing. He vanished as if dissolving into the air. When the FBI finally arrested him for killing a banker, agents expected an ordinary gangster, but within 5 minutes it was clear. They were facing someone who thought like an intelligence operative, who lied effortlessly, who read a detective's emotions faster than a camera could capture a facial change. And here was the FBI's fatal mistake. They believed they were the ones in control. Johnson began cooperating, giving details, confessing to episodes, dropping names. Agents thought he was cracking. He wasn't, and he was studying. He figured out who was on shift, which guards escorted inmates, where evacuation maps were posted, which employee was emotionally vulnerable. 3 months later, he executed one of the cleanest escapes in history, crafted a key out of soap, forged a guard's uniform, used documents he memorized during interrogations, and simply walked out through the main entrance. The FBI searched for him for 40 years. Officially, he is still wanted, not found, not confirmed dead. Not a single trace! This remains the ultimate collapse of every interrogation protocol the FBI ever relied on. These interrogations remind us of a terrifying truth. Sometimes the person sitting across from an agent is not just dangerous. He is smarter, colder, and more patient than the entire system. The FBI can have cameras, protocols, walls, but one mistake and a monster walks free. And every time the interrogation room door closes, agents risk reliving one of these stories.